by decade, sort of every American great you've ever heard of, or actually every 20th century great. Picasso, Rock, Kahlo, George O'Keeffe. There is a huge drip painting by Jackson Pollock that also may be late for another meeting. We need to see tendency here. Even Soup Cans by Andy Warhol at the end, who I should note was a Scholastic winner once upon a time. As were Donald Lipsky, as you leave, and you see the horse sitting on that lovely chair out front, Scholastic winner. As you turn around and look back at the Darren Art Museum and see Red Room Shootout up on the second floor of our Duncan Pavilion, another Scholastic winner. You all are a great company. Anyway, I'm walking through Modern Masters, and it starts out with a quote by Jackson Pollock that said, "Each age finds its own technique." So I was walking through and falling in love with what the Impressionists were doing, what the Cubists were doing, what the later artists were doing, being inspired by this century of people, really finding their creative voice, finding new creative directions. And that happened to be the first day I saw the Scholastic show. And it actually gave me goosebumps to walk downstairs and see the show and realize that here is the next generation finding their voice, tapping into their creative passion, that it is all of a continuum, and that I was so glad that we had Modern Masters over in that building and that we had the Scholastic winners here in this building. So, to the student artists, I applaud you for your phenomenal work, and I encourage you to sort of keep on the path you're on. For the teachers in this group, I thank you, not only for what you do for the students, but actually what you're really doing for all of us long term. So actually, I will leave the round of applause for both of you. This year, I have sort of the special honor of being able to award a few students a chance to work with the Denver Art Museum a little bit further. It is both an honor to announce these honorees and, unfortunately, for my sake, a chance to mangle your names. So I apologize in advance, even if my phonetic sort of spellings don't get me to get it quite right. The first award is actually a scholarship for a student to attend our Radical Movements course taught by Dean Sobel and other graduate level professors throughout the area, looking at Modern Masters, really understanding what was happening there. And when selecting the student for this award, we were looking for a piece that showed not only exemplary craftsmanship, but also a mature aesthetic awareness and vision. And so I would love the recipient of this scholarship award to stand up. It is Min Ye, who is in the 11th grade at Golden High School. Next up is a group of students who are going to get to be part of what we call our Artist Encounter program. Every year, the Art Museum features contemporary artists in residency up in our American Indian Artist in Residence studio. And our current artist in residence is Rose Simpson, an absolutely brilliant ceramicist. And in looking at students who would like to have the opportunity to work with Rose, we looked for students who showed superb skill in ceramics for obvious reasons, and also really fine creative execution of their craft. The 8 students who I'm going to announce are going to be part of a 2-hour program where they'll get to pick Rose's brain about her creative process, what it takes to be a professional artist. And then those students are also going to help us share that with other students, because we will be creating a mini documentary that will go up on our website to really share what it is like to be an artist. We're really counting on these students asking the questions that other students will benefit in understanding about artists. So again, I would ask the students to stand up when I call your name. The 8 students are Wilson Beach from Boulder High School, Margaret Anderman from East High School. Go East. celebrating a birthday this week, stand and be recognized. So if it's your birthday this week, please stand up. Next, I'd like to invite some of our special guests, please, to stand and be recognized. Some of the very special people we have here today are Jim Williams, Education Trustee, Rex Brown and Allison Brown, Education Trustee, Lorraine Higby, Education Trustee, and Bernadette Berger of the Berger Foundation. Now I'd like to invite our Denver Rotary Club President, Foundation President, Lucius Ashby, and our Scholastic Art Awards Program Director, Pam Stark, to the podium for a special check presentation.
Good afternoon. The Rotary Club in Denver is pretty proud of his long-standing support of the involvement in Scholastic Arts Awards in Colorado. Scholastics has been in Colorado since 1949. Rotary has been the primary benefactor for the last 31 years. In fact, the Denver Rotary and Denver Rotary Club Foundation have a wonderful history with the visual arts. The bulk of the corpus of the foundation was created by the Cell of Art through a 20-year run of the artist American Cell of Exhibition, which in its day was one of the top 3 exhibitions of contemporary American representation of art in the country. We are proud to give back to the arts community through our involvement with Scholastics. You might should ask, well, why do we support Scholastic? I just want to know. Scholastics gives students well-deserved exposure to their schoolmates and to other art students and teachers across the state, where students get to show their talent in a very equal way. Scholastics gives students exposure to institutions of higher learning, and from Scholastic, they have been awarded all to these Scholastics, they have been awarded scholarships totaling $253,000 each. Study the complex rules of competition and conform them and to execute according to the deadlines, which is a very real and important skill in this world. Scholastic puts students in a competitive environment, again, a real-world situation. Scholastic encourages the use of imagination as well as critical thinking and problem solving. Scholastic gives students a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. So at this time, I would like here to present this check for $8,000 to Pam Stark, Director of Scholastics. I should tell you, I would like to point out that Pam and her wonderful team are entirely volunteer. They do this out of love of the students, out of love of the art, and their leadership. This is why this is Scholastic. Thank you.
I would like to present Rotary with a special gift today. They have, as you said, Rotarians have been our sponsors for 31 years. And we go through some rough times and we go through lots of good times. This $8,000, if you see the printed material that's at your tables, some of that $8,000 is made possible through the grant I received through the foundation. Isabella, are you here? Would you stand up, please? Isabella is one of our American Vision nominees, and today I would like to present Rotary with this beautiful photograph to put in your office.
I think we're ready for you now to present a slideshow in recognition of teachers and students.
And now, this is the exciting part. You've seen the work, and we'll go through it from A to Z. We have almost 100 students that were selected by the Denver Art Museum today, and their work represents over 4,000 pieces that were submitted this year for the state competition. There were 312 teachers that submitted work, and we're grateful to all of them. If you are a Scholastic winner, would you please stand up? emerging artists long before the world takes notice. These students are the next generation of visionaries, leaders, and entrepreneurs. The luncheon and showcase is a powerful way to respect the artists. Again, Rotarians, we would like to thank you for your help. I would also now like to thank some very special people that made this happen today. Justine, Linda, Judy, would you stand up? Breezy, and Sharon. Give them all. Sharon, this celebration carries on its wings the experience of thousands of students who have participated in the awards, and this is an incredible mark that makes our culture. Today, last year, we were so excited we could announce who our American Vision winner was. But this year we're 2 days off, so the Berger Foundation gives us a wonderful scholarship, but I don't know who the winner is yet, so you can't celebrate with that happening. But thank you very much.
Let's have one more round of applause for all these fabulous students. Now, I'd like to invite Todd Bacon, Chair of our Rotary Scholastic Arts Committee, to the podium to introduce today's featured program speaker.
Thank you, President Allison. First of all, I'd like to add my thanks to the steering committee, the board of directors for Scholastics. They worked so hard to put this on. The Colorado Art Education Association, the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, the members of Rotary, the contributors in particular to the Denver Rotary Club Foundation that makes this all possible. And I'd like to single out some people who made this particular event possible. Ellen Spangler, down here. Ellen, would you stand up, please? The coordinator of school and teacher programs here at the museum. Ellen's been the backbone of making this happen. Of course, Pam Starr, Darlene Mast, who's probably out here somewhere. I don't know. Darlene is the tireless executive director of Denver Rotary. And then also Sharon Rouse, who we just met. Sharon works on Scholastics and is also a docent here with the education department. These people have been meeting since August to make this event possible. So these things just don't happen kind of organically. It takes quite a bit of work. Our speaker today is Dean Sobel. Dean is the director of the Clyfford Still Museum and the curator of the Modern Masters exhibition that you've been hearing about, as well as the concurrent 1959 Albright Knox Art Gallery exhibition recreated. That's right next door to the Clyfford Still Museum. I think to call the Albright Knox in Buffalo art gallery is a little bit of a misnomer. I think an art gallery is a place where you go to buy art, but this is one of the oldest art museums in the country. Its original building being completed in 1905. They've been collecting art for 150 years. They happened to hit a real sweet spot in the mid-20th century with one of their benefactors, a man named Seymour Knox Jr., who had an eye and a way of twisting arms to bring a lot of this art to the Albright Knox. And it just so happens that 20th century art is the specialty of our speaker. It made Dean a perfect choice to head the Clyfford Still Museum, and also made him a perfect choice to be the curator of both of these exhibitions. I saw a note in the column in the Denver Post about this Modern Masters installations, and it said, both shows share a straightforwardness that keeps the emphasis on the art. The art museum did little more than paint the walls in its Hamilton building galleries, leaving the wow factor to the superstars. And wow. So Dean, I think that's quite a compliment to your work there. Dean has been at the Clyfford Still Museum since the beginning in 2005. Prior to that, he served 5 years as the director of the Aspen Art Museum, and 5 years before that with the Milwaukee Art Museum. Dean has curated over 60 exhibitions on international contemporary art. You don't seem old enough to do 60 exhibitions, but it shows his productivity. His expertise runs very, very deep. So students, parents, teachers, Rotarians, please welcome Dean Sobel.
Good afternoon, and it's actually terrific to be back before the Rotary group. I think I was speaking to Clyfford still maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I'm only going to touch on still a little bit. As I probably said when I spoke about the Clyfford Still project, the 2-hour version of this is much easier and probably more coherent. So I'm going to move very, very quickly through a lot of images. Do I have to advance up here with the PowerPoint, or do I have to say next? Who knows? I just realized that. Wave a hand. Okay. So very, very quickly, the Albright Knox, as Todd mentioned, is, in addition to the history mentioned, actually has one of the greatest collections of 20th century art in the country, just behind the Museum of Modern Art that you all know probably well from your trips to New York. And I would put the Art Institute of Chicago second. The lack of recognition of a museum in Buffalo, I think, is what caused this occasion for them to take the creme de la creme of their 20th century collection and Denver's actually the first stop of a 4-stop tour. But it made us realize at the Clyfford Still Museum that we should try to get involved some way because of the fact that all of the artists before Clyfford Still emerges in 1945 really provide the context for Still and his contemporaries in terms of how they emerge on the scene after the Second World War. And then I think so many of the works in the second half of the exhibition show the influence of Still and Pollock and others. So we are collaborating on this exhibition. Your ticket gets you into both museums, something we've never done before. And why don't we jump in a little bit now to see the exhibition. Next slide, please. This is a view of the Albright Knox, their original building, 1905 building, taken by Patricia Still, the wife of the artist Clyfford Still, on the occasion of his exhibition there in 1959 that I'll say something about when we get to the Clyfford Still Museum component. Next slide. For purposes of brevity, I think the single definition I want you to take away in terms of what is modern art, and there are whole degrees you could get in answering that question. More than anything, I want you to consider that sometime in the mid-19th century, probably certainly by the 1860s or 1870s, there was this breaking away from tradition. More or less before that time, there were fairly close rules and ways in which artists must work if you wanted to have recognition, and particularly recognition from the state academy systems. And then by 1860s or 1870s, a group of artists started to realize they wanted to do it their own way. And so when we start to talk about modernism or a modern era, it's really that graft of a branch, if you will, that starts out as being very much ridiculed and very, very much misunderstood. I think some of these artists are probably misunderstood today. But at the same time, if you know anything about the art market with Vincent van Gogh or Pablo Picasso or Andy Warhol, they are the most sought-after artists of the day, which actually tells you why exhibitions of modern art, among other reasons, are so rare. You may have seen Van Gogh shows here, you may have seen Picasso or Matisse retrospectives, but a span of the 20th century is a rather uncommon thing. And this is a rare occasion for you to see those objects in one venue. The exhibition starts, curiously, right where the Passport to Paris exhibition left you off. If you came this winter to the Denver Art Museum, you would have seen an exhibition devoted mostly to 19th century art, and including the Impressionists and so-called Post-Impressionists. This is Camille Pissarro, one of the founders of Impressionism, but then also one of the artists who worked in what we call a pointillist style. When you see this painting, relatively small, in the exhibition in the first room, you'll see that he is starting to break up form and even describe space like sky and atmosphere with little dabs of paint, broken brushstrokes that are very, very small, almost pixelated in modern terms. And I think as you walk through the Modern Masters exhibition, one thing that I tend to detect is the increasing tendency of wanting the paint to be a kind of expressive agent. So before, in traditional art, paint was carefully brushed on in thin layers and in a very fine way that made you think it was a photograph or an actual hand or an actual still life piece of fruit. But in the modern era, showing process and exposing the way paint is actually functioning in works of art becomes very, very acute. Next slide, next pair. I've said to other groups, I think there's a new ordinance in the city of Denver that the Vincent van Gogh must be on view at all times. This is the third show in a row where there's a Van Gogh. But I want to turn my attention more to this Paul Gauguin, a very iconic image. And I'm very curious, not in this talk, but some of these images I think will look familiar to you, if not this Gauguin, others. This is a Spirit of the Dead Watching, an image he made of coming upon this woman in Tahiti and having her startled out of sleep into realizing that there's this man in her room. The idea of a kind of otherworldliness, though, permeates this image. The Spirit of the Dead Watching seems to be that African or Tahitian South Sea sculpture at the left. The unusual patterning and almost surreal-like imagery in the background sets the stage not just for the more scenes of everyday life that the Impressionists started to bring in, but Gauguin later started to create a world that's more imagined and more based on feeling. And so art doesn't have to describe something that's actually right before us. It's something that these modern artists tend to exploit. Next slide. The next room features a number of artists working in Paris at the beginning of the 20th century. As you probably know, Paris was the center of the art world. Picasso had relocated there from Spain, and this is one of his Rose period works, which predates the more radical Cubist images. But the ability to show a group of artists, I'll show you some more here, all working around the time of the First World War, a little bit earlier, such as Bodigliani, show you the range of approaches to figure style and color and other things. Next slide. The more brash colors, this is Andre Derain, an artist singled out as being a wild beast when they showed their work in the same year this painting was made in the Paris exhibitions in 1905. Color no longer has to be used to describe what the eye sees before it. We call this somewhat arbitrary color. Color is now being used to evoke certain sensations when two secondary colors are put side by side, or ultimately to create mood and feeling. Next slide. Abstraction is essentially invented in the 20th century. You'll see many examples of that throughout the exhibition. Vasily Kandinsky, working around 1913, is probably the figure we look to first as being the most cogent example of artists breaking down form to such a degree that we would call it abstract or not objective. Next slide. And again, abstract art is invented 100 years ago, people, so get over it by now. That's a side story we're having on our table. Henri Matisse, this painting called Music. I don't have time to go into all the different relationships of bent limbs and plants versus musical notes, but there's so much rhyming and harmony being created in this picture that it's turned into one of the most prized examples by Henri Matisse and now in view at the Denver Art Museum. Or the more fanciful, again, playful imagery of another artist born in Russia but working in Paris, Marc Chagall. Next set. The Cubists, two examples here by Fernand Léger, are the ones who really start to change everything by analyzing space and form and breaking it down into faceted geometric planes. Cubism is really the dominant visual style, if you will. It even gets reduced to a style for the first probably 30 years of the 20th century, as you'll see in the next slide, please. This is Robert Delaunay, an artist using a Cubist style, but coming up with what I think is the second definition of modern art, the idea of a kind of celebration of the modern era. You'll see things like the Eiffel Tower, a feat of structural engineering that wouldn't have been possible probably, at least in steel, much before that time. And then the invention of flight. Remember, by 1913, when this picture was made, the idea of flying in the sky was still a very novel concept. And so this picture, in a modern painting language, is also celebrating all the inventions of modern technology and modern engineering. Next image. By the 1920s, and particularly after Sigmund Freud's writings became translated, a number of artists were interested less in the scene world, as we've been talking about, but the idea of these kind of dreamscapes or mindscapes, of meta-reality, what is oftentimes referred to as surreality or surrealism. This is a Spanish artist, Juan Miró, who creates this almost theatrical stage. It seems to be all these images and activities are being carried out within a platform, if you will. Some images you can kind of recognize that they appear to be figural. Some appear to be based on primitive art forms. Others seem to be pulled from biological textbooks, what we call biomorphisms, biological shapes. But ideas that are based in the subconscious and become a very important springboard for the art of the period after the Second World War, especially. Next slide. Salvador Dali, the more imagistic version of surrealism, is well represented in this exhibition as well. With these kind of strange dreamscapes where you never know what time it is. Look at the strange shadowing, and then same kind of time almost between sleep and being awake. Those moments where sometimes in dreams these irrational images start to permeate our consciousness from our subconscious. Next image, please. And then this broad idea of expressionism that I think honestly runs through this whole show. The idea of artists varying perspective, varying anatomy, varying color, having the freedom in the modern era to play around with the traditions of art, to create expressive feelings and moods. And whether it's this image of a carcass of beef, a very gruesome, non-traditional image, a cramped interior space by the Max Beckmann, this idea of cities and culture and society being a somewhat frightening place. Expressionism seems to be almost the dominant way of working through the modern era. Next slide. Or Giacometti, the sculptor, Swiss sculptor, who takes the human form and stretches it like a rubber band almost to the point of snapping, as if the forces of being alive are compressing this figure inward and inward to a degree that, again, I would call a very high degree of expressionism. Next image. Or Francis Bacon, a British artist, this very strange image of walking past, or perhaps in his car, driving past this image of a threatening dog attached to a subject that we don't even see, an owner or a man walking on the street whose identity is even apparent to us. Next slide. Modern art as it emerges in the United States is a very important aspect of the Modern Masters exhibition because so much attention is normally given to European artists. So in the early years of the 20th century, artists like Georgia O'Keeffe, who made some of her own very early abstractions by 1916, 17, and this image is still working in a very abstract mode, even though it's called Green Door, and her colleague Arthur Dove are very much neck and neck with some of the inventions that are happening across the Atlantic Ocean. Next slide. And then artists associated with the Harlem Renaissance, Horace Pippin on the left, or a Mexican artist, Frida Kahlo, wrestling with ideas of her own identity. This Frida Kahlo is very small, about the size of the Mona Lisa, I would tell you. But it's a wonderful image and a very rare thing to see. As much as you think you know Frida Kahlo's work, I doubt that many of you have actually seen one in person, especially a self-portrait and one that deals with her own identity so directly. So this is worth the price of admission alone, I would argue. Next slide. And then everything starts to change around the time of the Second World War, as you would expect world wars to do. A lot of European artists come to the United States. Arshil Gorky, I think, starts to work in a way that not only looks like some European earlier movements and approaches, but there starts to be a more intense expressionism that starts to emerge in this image. And then the next images, please. These are all the American abstract expressionists. One of the centerpieces of the exhibition is this drip painting by Jackson Pollock, which very, very quickly, without spending too much time on abstract expressionism, the abstract expressionists wanted to address the great themes that all art, all great art, had tried to address, what sometimes we call the human condition. Probably what those expressionist artists were trying to convey, Giacometti, Bacon, Max Beckmann, and others. But they wanted to do it through this, again, new and even more advanced abstract image making. So they're very flat images, they're very infinite images, there's no center of this picture. The left corner is as important as the center, as the right, the right side. And they become almost environmental when the paintings grow to the scale of 15 or 17 feet. It's no longer something you look at, it's something you become part of. Next image. So the American abstract expressionists are probably the strongest part of the exhibition. They have all the great American artists who stole the attention from Paris after the Second World War, and New York becomes the center of the American art world, which it probably still is, or maybe even international art world. So we'll go through these kind of quickly. Willem de Kooning, next. Robert Motherwell. Mark Rothko, something that's a little bit more meditative. There's even a bench in front of this picture. I made sure we had a bench. You can just sit and park your thoughts on this image for a while. Next image. And then the great Clyfford still. This is a picture that the Albright Max acquired right from Still Studio. As you'll hear at the end of my talk, Still ended up giving 31 works, which were restricted from travel. And so this picture was able to come as part of the non-restricted collection and is one of Still's greatest and probably most reproduced pictures. Next slide. And then we deal with these more recent developments in the 60s and 70s. Minimalism, where artists were no longer interested in having hidden meanings behind paintings, but having paintings be just simple facts. Frank Stella said, what you see in my paintings is what you see. There's nothing more that I'm intending than these 2.5-inch bands of black paint, house paint, that he applies with a brush, and then the lines you see are actually bare canvas coming up from the surface below. It's a very factual, systematic picture that is very much in opposition to the more free way of working that Jackson Pollock has still employed. Next slide. At this part, you can barely see this thing, but an artist trying to evoke nature through the simplest idea of rhythms and patterns and grids. The idea that the universe is filled with patterns and systems and structures, 24 hours in a day, 365 days a year. And how can that be synthesized down into a painting that she even calls trees, but something that doesn't actually look like a tree. Next image. The great Andy Warhol, one of the icons of American art. I mean, who else but American could have made an image that looks like this? This is a very early painting, 1962, when Warhol was still hand painting his work. You may know by 1963-64, not only was he using more silkscreen, in which there was a level of distance for making paintings, but he even had other people come up with the ideas and actually make his art, thus challenging the whole notion of what it is to be an artist if you don't make the art. And we enter this realm of a kind of conceptual art that still permeates so much today. Next image. And then the great Roy Lichtenstein, like Warhol, also done in 1962. This is an image that already existed in society. He took it out of an ad for a vacation spot in Long Island, cropped it down just to that woman's face, and then blows it up to the scale of a major painting. And in that transformation, we realize one thing, that artists aren't even creating images anymore. They exist in the world and they're just grabbing and putting it in their own work. But also he emphasizes the abstractness of these kinds of images. I detect even the idea of stylized abstract expressionist brushstrokes in the woman's hair. Think about that. Next slide. And then finally, given the relationship that still had with the Albright Knox Art Gallery, next slide, we have taken this as an opportunity since we own 3,000 works by Clyfford Still. We have 95% of everything he made. And we've been meaning to recreate some of his lifetime exhibitions, that we would start with the exhibition he had in 1959 in Buffalo. This was a very important exhibition because Still had dropped out of the art world in 1951, and this was his first re-emergence showing the world not only early works that he had never shown publicly, but also the work that he had been working on during the 1950s and perhaps some of his strongest work, including that yellow and black painting. So these are images of the original exhibition from our archives. Next slide. As are these. And we've tried to recreate it as much as possible. Our room proportions are different. Some of the paintings have gone off into the world and we didn't borrow back. Next slide. But for example, in these three cases, we have these works and they're in the orientation that you see them today. You also may note that museum architects in 1905 never envisioned paintings this big. So the paintings hang over base boards and wainscotings and in unusual ways by 21st century standards. Next slide. Here's Still at the opening. He never enjoyed the social aspect of being an artist, so it's sort of fun to think of how he's probably crawling in his skin there. Next slide. We have lots of archival material. We have these notes from his records that we now possess at the museum. We've got a virtual interactive where you can walk through all of these rooms and see the paintings, digital images stripped into a computer model of the original Albright Knox building, so you can actually see or virtually walk through the 1959 exhibition. Next slide. And then what we're really excited about, we stumbled on, we weren't expecting to find this, audio recordings by Clyfford Still. We also found some Super 8 films we didn't know existed. But we have Still reading his catalog introduction to the 1959 show that we've digitized, transcribed, and have turned into an interactive so you can see Still saying some very important, or hear Still saying some very important things about his intentions for his work and get the character of his voice as opposed to just the written page. I think that's my last slide. Or this just represents, and it's represented in our show, the good experiences he had working with the Albright Knox led him to give 31 paintings to that museum in 1964. In addition to the 2 they bought only to the holdings in Denver, where we have 825, so they've got a long ways to go. But still, it's very closely associated with that institution. If there's anyone here from Buffalo or upstate New York, and you've been to the Albright Knox, you probably don't need convincing about Clyfford still, because they've shown his work pretty extensively for the last 2 or 3 generations, and particularly in these rooms, these groups of his works only, and in isolation. I'm convinced that's my last slide, but I do want to just remind you that when you come to Modern Masters or you go to the Clyfford Still Museum, whatever ticket you buy will get you into both museums. You'll have member pricing if you're a member of either museum, and you can buy them in person, you can buy them online, you can buy them just about anywhere, and we have it figured out so that you get access to both museums through GA. So I think that's my time. Thanks for your patience. Thanks all for
for you. As you may know, Rotary is involved in eradicating polio. So we have made a donation to Polio Plus Monthly. Rotarians, next week we will be back at the DAC. Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Denver Downtown Partnership, will be our featured program speaker. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of instructions for our exhibition tour. Rotarians who purchase tickets to the Modern Masters exhibition can enter any time between 1 and 1:30. To enter the Scholastic Art Awards exhibition on the lower level, please take the elevator or stairs located on your left as you exit Ponte Hall. Now, I'd like to invite to the podium Gal Barak, Scholastic Art Awards Gold Key winner.
First, I want to say congratulations to all my fellow Scholastics winners. I would like to thank all of the parents and teachers for showing up, and also would like to thank the Rotarians for their support for the last 31 years. Scholastics has been a great program